Right. Good morning and namaskaram, everyone. Very, very warm welcome. We have been very excited about this reading for months, and Pramila has really painstakingly been working on this. As most of you know, we are Matwala, and I'll try to keep my opening remarks really to the bare minimum because we are more than eager to hear the poets and we want to maximize the time for them. Today is a very, very stellar panel, a very special panel, very fine lineup of poets. We have some very basic housekeeping rules. What we will do is to try and save time, we will post the bios in the chat so we get more time to hear from the poets. We have four poets, we have the translators. It's like a transatlantic reading. Uh, this is our seventh and final event of the year. Matwala's done 7 events this year. And I couldn't think of a better note to conclude the year with, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. I'm going to hand it over to Pramila, and www.matwala is our website, and you can find more about us there. Just sit back and enjoy, and very warm welcome again to the poets.
So, vanakkam everybody, welcome. So great to see all of you here. Usha and I are extremely thrilled and delighted that all of you poets from different regions have joined us today, and our audience as well from 3 different continents. So first, I would like to say a little bit about myself. I'm Pramila Venkateswaran, and I am a co-coordinator of Matwaala along with Usha Akella. And we've been doing different readings to bring solidarity among different groups of people. So we've extended Matwaala not only to South Asian poets, but to poets of color in the United States, as well as several marginalized groups in different parts of the world. So that is our mission, to build solidarity among poets who are less visible around the world. So first, to provide you some kind of a context for Dalit poetry, I'd like to read a short introduction that I've written, and here it goes. Dalit is a Marathi word that Dalit identified poets used to describe their oppressed condition over the centuries within the caste hierarchy of Hinduism, and at the same time to express their resistance to casteist oppression. Dalit poetry grew out of protest. It is indeed ironic that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, who was one of the authors of the Indian Constitution, was himself subject to the discrimination that millions of Dalits experienced throughout India and continue to do so today. Dalit poetry, written in a variety of Indian languages depending on the region the poet is from, covers a variety of themes such as the critique of Brahmanism and upper caste hegemony, honoring the land and the elements that offer human and animal sustenance, portrayals of community leaders, realistic depictions of working conditions of men and women, accounts of violence against women, and calling out the egregious moral deficiencies in society stemming from economic and social inequality based on the caste system. Usha and Akella and I at Matwaala thought of doing this program at Dalit Poetry to inform our audience about the literary output of Dalit poets in various regions of India. Most people are perhaps aware of the Marathi Dalit poets, since much of the earliest Dalit movements took place in Maharashtra, and Dr. Ambedkar was an indomitable force there. In Tamil Nadu, in the early 20th century, Tandai Periyar was influential in bringing Dalit causes to the limelight. The literary output in Tamil Nadu, beginning in the late 19th century, with Ayodhidas, has only steadily risen today. Similarly, in Gujarat, we find a counterculture for more than a century rebelling against the nationalistic and casteist hegemonic forces, resulting in a wealth of poetry and song by Dalit authors. In Kerala, where progressive ideas rest easily with egalitarian social and political values, Dalit voices have blossomed in Malayalam literature. So we are indeed lucky to hear voices from these regions on our panel, bringing with them the richness of each region: Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Kerala. Among the poets here today, you will hear not only a critique of systems, but also a reverence of nature and the environment. The feminist spirit is paramount in these poets, as they are deeply conscious of women's struggles and how that impacts not only families, but the entire society. Their articulation of the sacred, as found in nature and the self, is also accompanied by some of Dalit poetry's depiction of Buddhist teachings that offer a fitting solace to the human being enduring the wounds of oppression. The barriers of the caste system and barriers of the caste system that has denied basic rights of education and choice of employment, dignity, and self-respect has also affected uh, literary output and access to publication and dissemination of Dalit writings. So it is all the more important that as poets and writers, we open venues for marginalized voices to be heard. This is Matwaala's mission. Above all, in the autocratic trend that we see globally, Dalit poetry offers us the message of democracy and shows us what true democracy can and ought to look like. So it is my pleasure to open today's Dalit poetry panel with poet Arangamallika from Tamil Nadu. I have put her bio in the chat, but I will just introduce you with a few highlights about her biography. Arangamallika's most recent book is Panayanive Nirkiral. Her themes are centered around land and workers toiling on the land, as well as Buddhist themes. She teaches at Ethraj College in Chennai, and she's won several awards. And I have listed all the awards in the chat, so please take a look. And the award that really struck me was her Nalla Sriyar Award, recognizing her as the director of the Women's Center. She's celebrated as a poet, writer, speaker, a voice for the children of the oppressed and for their education for 25 years, and an outstanding feminist thinker, and continues to be a Dalit feminist. And she has also given many lectures on Buddhism. So welcome, Arangamallika. We are so delighted that you're here and we are eager to hear your poetry. And the translator is V. Aishwarya, and I'll be posting her bio as well as in the chat. So V. Aishwarya is a translator and critic. She teaches English at the Department of Liberal Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal. Apart from her research publications in academic journals and anthologies, she has written essays on Tamil film culture for popular publications, and she was shortlisted for the Mori Prize 2022, and her translations of Tamil writer Jayamohan's essays have appeared in Frontline magazine. So thank you, Aishwarya, for being part of this panel. So here we go to hear Arangamallika and translated by Aishwarya. Welcome, both of you.
Good evening to one and all present here. Before I would like to read my poem, my special thanks to Ms. Geetha, Ms. Pramila Venkateswaran, and other members. Especially my thanks goes to Aishwarya for translating my poems. I would like to read my poem. That is Appa 3. Appa. அப்பா பற்றி இது வந்து என்னுடைய இட் இஸ் மை பர்சனல் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் டுவர்ட்ஸ் மை ஃபாதர், பிட்வீன் மீ அண்ட் மை ஃபாதர். ஸோ அதுதான் இந்த கவிதையில நான் வச்சிருக்கேன். அப்பா, அப்பா, நீ கைபிடித்து அழைத்து சென்ற விரல்களில் அணிந்து பார்க்கவில்லை ஒரு மோதிரம், தோளில் சுமந்து சாமி காட்டிய கழுத்துக்கு போடவில்லை ஒரு செயின், ஆண்டைகளின் மிரட்டலின் போது பயந்து அணிய மறுத்த செருப்பை வாங்கித் தரவில்லை உன் கால்களுக்கு. அடற்பணிக்கு போர்த்தியதில்லை ஒரு போர்வை. பரம்படித்து சமப்படுத்தி விளைந்த நெல்லில் 3 வேளை வயிறு நிறைய தின்றதில்லை சோறு. பண்டிகைக்கு வாங்கித் தரவில்லை ஒரு வேட்டி சட்டை. கோவணம் விற்று படிக்க வைக்கிறேன் என்றாய். பதவிக்கு வந்த பிறகு பழி தூற்றியோரை கண் 2 முன்னால் காது 2 பின்னால் திரும்பி பார்க்காமல் போகச் சொன்ன உன் சொல் மந்திரம். நீ என் வரம். விழியோரம் கசியும் நீர்த்துளிகளில் நான் உனக்கு செய்யாமல் மறந்ததை மன்னித்து எப்போதும் போல கதை பேசிக் கொண்டிரு, எனக்கு ஒரு கதை சொல்லியாக. This is my first poem. ஐஸ்வர்யா இப்ப பண்றீங்க, நான் அப்புறமா
நான் படிச்சிடுறேங்க. The poem is called Appa. I mean, Appa is the title for many of the poems, which means father. I mean, she's written 3, 4, and so this is in that collection labeled as Appa 3. So I'll just read. Father, I didn't put on the finger you held me by a ring. I didn't adorn the neck on which you mounted me to watch the deity afar with a chain. I didn't buy slippers for your bare feet that you left unshod, fearing the master's threats. I didn't drape you with a blanket in chilly winter. You didn't get to eat 3 square meals after harrowing and plowing the field to grow rice in it. Didn't buy new waity and shirt for the festival. You said you sold even your loincloth to give me an education. Your advice that I move on, eyes fixed forward, ears turned backwards, never to look back and to pay no heed to those abusive tongues after ascending to power, is my watchword. You are my boon. In tears that ooze away from the eyes, forgive and forget all that I failed to do. Continue telling me your tales, my storyteller, my father.
Thank you. Another one. அப்பா 4வது கவிதை அது. தேடுகிறேன் நட்டு வைத்திருக்கும் நாற்றுகளின் பேரில் அப்பாவின் காலடி சுவடுகளை. தேடுகிறேன் நட்டு வைத்திருக்கும் நாற்றுகளின் பேரில் அப்பாவின் காலடி சுவடுகளை. தேடுகிறேன் நெற்பயிர் வருடும் காற்றில் அவரின் சுவாசத்தை. தேடுகிறேன் நெற்பயிர் வருடும் காற்றில் அவரின் சுவாசத்தை. கவனிக்கிறேன் அவருடனான உரையாடலை சுவற்று பூச்சிகள் முணமுணப்பில். கவனிக்கிறேன் அவருடனான உரையாடலை சுவற்று பூச்சிகளின் முணமுணப்பில். ஏங்குகிறேன் இளைப்பாற்றிய தோள்களுக்காக, அசையும் மரங்களின் கிளைகளில் கட்டிய தூளியை. தேடுகிறேன் பற்களில் நீ கடித்து துப்பிய நகங்களில் உன் பிறை நெற்றியை. தேடுகிறேன் எரிந்து போன கலப்பையில் சாம்பலாகிய உன் உடலை. தேடுகிறேன் காளை மாடுகளுக்கு கற்றுத்தந்த ஓட்டப்பந்தய வித்தையை. தேடுகிறேன் நுகத்தடி கடமுள குச்சிக்கு அடங்காத காளைகளை கட்டுக்குள் இருக்க சொன்ன கதையை. தேடுகிறேன் நுகத்தடி கடமுள குச்சிக்கு அடங்காத காளைகளை கட்டுக்குள் இருக்க சொன்ன கதையை. தேடுகிறேன் குப்பை குழிக்குள் இயற்கை விஞ்ஞானியின் உன் விதை அறிவை. தேடுகிறேன் குப்பை குழிக்குள் இயற்கை விஞ்ஞானியின் உன் விதை அறிவை. தேடுகிறேன் மாட்டுச்சாண துர்வாடையில் கழுவிய உன் கைகளில் காப்பு காய்த்து கிடக்கிறது ஒரு தலைமுறையின் நிலமும் பொழுதும். தேடுகிறேன் மாட்டுச்சாண துர்வாடையில் கழுவிய உன் கைகளில் காப்பு காய்த்து கிடக்கிறது ஒரு தலைமுறையின் நிலமும் பொழுதும். தேடுகிறேன்.
I'll read the translation now. This poem is also titled Father. I seek among the roots of the planted seedlings my father's footprints. I search amid the breeze that graces the paddy for his breath. I listen for his conversation in the murmur of the crickets. I long for his shoulders on which I rested, for the swaying cloth cradle he slung from tree branches. I look for your forehead crescent among the nails you had chewed and spat. I try to trace in the burnt up plough your body reduced to ashes. I seek after the athletic skill you taught our bulls to race ahead. I play back the story of how you tamed the oxen that resisted the stave on their yokes. I search inside the refuse pit for your traditional wisdom on the science of seeds. As I search, there remain in your calloused hands, covered in cow dung stench, the land and lifetime of a whole generation.
Good. Another one. ஒரு பிடிச்சோறு. ஒரு பிடிச்சோறு. வயோதிகம் பேசும் தடிவுடன் உட்கார்ந்திருப்பார் வாசலில். வயோதிகம் பேசும் தடிவுடன் உட்கார்ந்திருப்பார் வாசலில். 16 ஏக்கர் நிலம் பயிர் செய்து களைத்த முகத்தோடு. வரிசையாக அடுக்கில் மூட்டை சுமந்த மாட்டு வண்டி. வரிசையாக அடுக்கில் மூட்டை சுமந்த மாட்டு வண்டி. சலங்கை ஒலி கூட்டிய மாடுகளுடன் அரிக்கேன் விளக்கு தொங்க புறப்பட்டன வண்டி பாதையில். வரிசையாக அடுக்கில் மூட்டை சுமந்த மாட்டு வண்டி. சலங்கை ஒலி கூட்டிய மாடுகளுடன் அரிக்கேன் விளக்கு தொங்க புறப்பட்டன வண்டி பாதையில். காற்றின் திசை அறிந்து கைமாற்றிய பொழி விடுதலில். நெல் அப்படி தூவி விடுவாங்க, அது பொழி விடுதல்னு பேரு. காற்றின் திசை அறிந்து கைமாற்றி பொழி விடுதலில் பிரிந்த நெல்லும் கூளமும் மோதி பறந்தன நினைவில். கண் இமை வந்தடையும் தூக்கம் துறந்து அடர் இருளை இறுக்கி கட்டிய பிணையலில் உதிர்ந்து கிடந்த நெல்லும் வைக்கோலும் முதுமை துயரை பேசின. கண் இமை வந்தடையும் தூக்கம் துறந்து அடர் இருளை இறுக்கி கட்டிய பிணையலில் உதிர்ந்து கிடந்த நெல்லும் வைக்கோலும் முதுமை துயரை பேசின. கோடைக்கு கொடைக்கானலாகும் தாத்தாவின் வீட்டிற்கு வந்திருக்கும் பேர குழந்தைகளின் பசியாற்றிய கழனி. கோடைக்கு கொடைக்கானலாகும் தாத்தாவின் வீட்டிற்கு வந்திருக்கும் பேர குழந்தைகளின் பசியாற்றிய கழனி. செங்கல் சூளையாகி சிவந்ததில் பத்திரப்படுத்திய மரக்குதிரும் செஞ்சுவாலையாகி சாம்பலாகி வீசுகிறது காவிரி படுகை முழுவதும். செங்கல் சூளையாகி சிவந்ததில் நெல் மணிகளை பத்திரப்படுத்திய மரக்குதிரும் செஞ்சுவாலையாகி சாம்பலாகி வீசுகிறது காவிரி படுகை முழுவதும். அரிசுனை கழுவி, அந்த வைக்கோலை எடுத்தோம்னா மேலெல்லாம் அரிக்கும். அரிசுனை கழுவி ஆற்றில் நீந்தி அலுப்பு தீர குளிச்சதில் கரைந்த வியர்வை துளி அகவை அலையில் முட்டி மோதியது. அரிசுனை கழுவி ஆற்றில் நீந்தி அலுப்பு தீர குளிச்சதில் கரைந்த வியர்வை துளி அகவை அலையில் முட்டி மோதியது. எங்கே ஒரு பிடிச்சோறு, எங்கே ஒரு பிடிச்சோறு கேட்கிறது வயிறு. பண்ணலாம்.
I'll read the translation.
Yeah.
A handful of rice. He would sit at the door with a staff that spoke of his old age. Weariness on his face from cultivating 16 acres of land. In regular rows, the laden bullock carts, lit by hanging lanterns, departed along the trodden path, drawn by bulls with their tinkling bells. As winnowing hands expertly turned the paddy along the way of the wind, the chaff and the grain flew about wildly in memory. in eyelids that renounce sleep and embrace tightly the inky darkness, the scattered paddy and hay spoke of the sorrows of old age. Since the fertile field that fed the grandchildren who spent their summer in their grandfather's home, as if in the cool Kodaikanal hills, has turned into a red-hot brick kiln, the wooden silo that stored grains in the barn too was gutted to ashes that now blow across the Kaveri riverbed. Washing off the haze it is and swimming along the refreshing river to bathe away the day's weariness, a drop of sweat knocks against the wave of age. Where to find a handful of rice the stomach craves?
Good, nice, very nice. Last poem. நிழல். இது முழுக்க முழுக்க entirely different poem about Buddhism. ஆனந்தர், புத்தருக்கும் ஆனந்தருக்குமான அந்த வாழ்க்கையிலிருந்து வரக்கூடிய ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு கோட் அது. நிழல் இஸ் a டைட்டில். புத்தரை பின்தொடர்ந்த ஆனந்தர், புத்தரை பின்தொடர்ந்த ஆனந்தர் நிழல் ஆனந்தம், புத்தரை பின்தொடர்ந்த ஆனந்தர் நிழல் ஆனந்தம். இனிது நிழல் வெயிலுக்கு, இனிது நிழல் வெயிலுக்கு, நிலவின் ஒளி ஞான ஒளி, நிலவின் ஒளி ஞான ஒளி, நற்தவம், நற்தவம் பேரானந்தம், பேரானந்தம் ஆனந்தர், நிழலே ஆனந்தர், அன்பு நிழல், அறம் நிழல், அன்புடையார் எல்லாம் உடையார்.
I'll translate, the translation has been done by Dr. Pramila here. I'll read out the translation. The title of the poem is Shade. Ananda closely shadows Buddha. Shade is blissful. The present shade from heat. Silence. Silence brings rapture. Rapture is Ananda. Shade is Ananda. Love shade. Virtuous shade. Love is everything.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Done a wonderful job.
Thank you so much.
Nicely you have translated. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, I enjoyed a lot.
Thank you, Arangamallika, and thank you, Aishwarya. And I also enjoyed translating Shade. I just have one question for you, Arangamallika, and that is, you describe nature and also the oppression, especially of people working the land so beautifully. And at the same time, you're also writing poems with Buddhist themes. Do you see these two themes as separate, or are they interwoven?
I think it is separate, and also it is within that. ஏன்னா அன்புதான் எல்லாம் அப்படிங்கிறது வந்து ஒரு பெரிய கான்செப்டா நம்ம பார்த்துக்கிட்டு இருக்கிறோம். லவ் இஸ் எவ்ரிதிங். ஒரு பிடி சோறு, இந்த ஒரு பிடி சோறு நம்ம கொடுக்குறோம் இல்லையா, அந்த சோறு தான் வந்து அன்பு, அந்த சோறு தான் பௌத்தம். So we have to share our love and affection to each and every person. That is love, that is Buddhism. It comes from the fertile land also.
That's right.
That is what I mixed both.
That's right. Yeah. That's what I thought. And that's a beautiful concept that you have in that poem, Urupidi Soru, because it brings the Buddhist idea of love and sharing that is central to your poems, and which you have enumerated also in Niral. Thank you.
Manimekalai, the epic Buddhist Manimekalai, the heroine of Manimekalai, she taught the same thing.
That's right. For our audience, Manimekalai was a very long epic that was written by Ilango Adigal.
In the Manimekalai, Satanar.
Sadhana, right.
Mm.
So thank you very much, and we are moving
Oh,
on. And thank you very much,
yeah,
Arangamallika, for
yeah,
joining us today,
thank
and
you, thank
thanks
you.
to Aishwarya. We are moving on
Excuse
to our
me,
next
I'm
poet.
leaving to railway station so that if I have time, I will join in the railway station. Thank you, one and all,
Thank you.
participated in this forum.
Yeah,
Really, I enjoyed and I must thank you all.
you're welcome.
Yeah,
We're very
yeah,
happy that you were here.
thank you.
Usha will be introducing our next poet, Chandramohan. Usha, you're muted.
Um, I've posted Chandramohan's bio, and you can see uh, he has some very, very fine credentials. And I'd like to conserve time more to hear from the poet directly, and I'm sure we can all read the bios. Is this okay, Chandramohan, this approach?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine.
welcome. Welcome. I've been
Yeah.
reading your poems, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, this forum, for this opportunity to read my poems. This is my reading in a really long time. Okay. So I'm so happy that you've taken the initiative to curate Dalit poetry from all over India, especially someone like me who writes in English, who's who doesn't write in his own mother tongue, but whatever, times are changing. Something like that. There are Dalits writing in all languages, whatever. So, I thank this forum. I thank specifically the organizers. So I'll start reading my poems. This poem was written during the time of COVID, when we couldn't attend the funerals of some of our near and dear ones who have died due to COVID around. So the poem was this: in the inherited shade of a family tree. In the inherited shade of a family tree, when a lifeless body is disposed, discarded, discarded like a mango kernel, stories will sprout from afterlife. A tale enleaved, a tale enlivened through the through the breadths of many, an oasis with branches drooping, with the weight of other untold lives, a shade large enough for collective mourning for those who couldn't attend the funeral. My next poem is similar to the earlier poet. She had paid tribute to Buddhism, or the Buddhist traditions that are very much alive in Dalit Bahujan civil rights struggles. So this poem is based on a installation by a well-known artist from Trivandrum. His name is Rumson. It was called My Inner Voice. It was about a Mahavira statue being surrounded by knives pointing towards him, something like that, symbolic of violence, something like that. So the current Hindutva, or like Brahminical uh, religious epistemology, they have like silenced or like murdered lots of Buddhist or the subaltern icons of resistance. So it's like a tribute to them. So the poem goes: My inner voice. I imagine walking on a knife's edge. The path towards you forks at an infinite crossroad of unwritten history. These knives crisscross the canyon in pursuit of your glory, your waxing halo, my leading light. I yearn for light, truth sliced asymmetrically like a crescent erasing the rest of the moon. I yearn for light, truth sliced asymmetrically like a crescent erasing the rest of the moon. I'm intimidated by your tall stature, the missing link between the terrestrial and the celestial. History's Stone Age, history's Stone Age tongue was a flint knife. Now, her tongue is a Swiss knife, sickle, hammer, trident, dagger, or swastika. So I had a series of poems It was titled Love After Babel. Those poems were about translation. So I always had this observation that a lot of Dalit literature is like studied in translation, and there is a there is an element of taming or element of pasteurizing it so that it's very amenable to the market, or like it's deliberated in the English language, where the original poet who wrote the poem in Tamil or say Malayalam or say Marathi, his voice is severely dented. I used to have this agony in me. So I used to advocate, more and more people should be writing in English, but it may have its own problems though. But I was just, trying to critique or like scrutinize the act of translation, especially when a Savarna translator translates Dalit text. So my poem goes like this: Love After Babel. Number one, in a bilingual edition, I see the poem and its translation across the page as if reclining on a double bed. I always imagine a third poem, a perfect translation of the first, like a statue of a woman chiseled in unwrinkled time. Second, the empire has ebbed, the not so emaciated waistline of a patriarch. I see the language in a dim twilight, drawing its strength from its shadow like a tall yesteryear monument. Number three, wine brewed in freshly unearthed urns of time, from vineyards of grapes of wrath, deferred dreams distilled and entombed in grey rain clouds, drift into our open skies like newly translated poems. So it's like this are three sections from an ongoing series. So my next poem is like a rewrite on a poem by Charles Simic. His poem was titled "Serving Time," but my poem is like a small account of of our lives during maybe COVID or lockdown or whatever. So the poem goes like this: Serving Quarantine. Serving quarantine. Before being remanded to the death row of the sick, I was locked in a cell the size of my smartphone's screen. Serving my time, I read many books. Before being remanded to the death row of the sick, I was locked in a cell the size of my smartphone's screen. Serving my time, I read many books. Firstly, on pathology and medicine, then the Indian Penal Code. Then came lexicons of necessity and the end rhyme between need and greed. First, on pathology and medicine, then the Indian Penal Code. Then came lexicons of necessity and end rhyme between need and greed. Finally, books on economics, to choose between two nightmares. First, death heralded by a sensation of drowning. Second, the prospect of a slow, starving death. A little ventriloquism surrounds me. The next poem was was written at the time of the George Floyd protest. So I believe there were a lot of protests which said Black Lives Matter in the UK, in the US, everywhere. So in India we'll have something like Dalit Lives Matter too. So my poem is like this: The inherited shade of my skin. I delve into the past, wide-eyed, curious, like a child frisking himself in the mirror, ascertaining how shiny his skin can get in available light, and wonder if ever I'll outshine the rising sun, and how innocuous my name could be, wrapped in a different shade of melanin. So how much of time do I have? I have to be conscious of the time.
You can read a couple more poems.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a poem in the form of a newspaper report. Okay, it's like an experiment that I've done. Um, so the poem is so you should imagine that all of you are like in your respective homes, and one morning you get your newspaper. So imagine if you're living in Chennai, you get your Hindu newspaper, and then in the paper, you're looking at a particular news article. So the poem is like this: accident at a river. Accident following wrangling over naming of rivulets. Accident following wrangling over naming of rivulets. Staff reporter, Kabani, November 5. Okay, today's date is like December 2nd. It's okay. Kabani, December 2nd. Okay, staff reporter. 20 bodies of poets and translators were discovered from the banks of a river near the state capital. The bodies were like couplets, intertwined, and the river crisscrossed the border between the two states, built along thoughts on linguistic states. The camp director had warned the participants of the translation workshop that spirits of other participants could leap into theirs, and each of them were given aliases, like a plastic steering oar that never yields to either currents of the river. The poets claimed that to be baptized in a form of poetry in another language, it was necessary to nosedive into a particular river. Some of the translators were also language teachers. They allegedly danced on the hanging bridge, hoping that their students weren't around. Another prospective reason for the onset of the rancor was that the poets demanded dope during short recesses. They insisted that poems be written and consumed in the same tongue, like dope bought directly from the source before being chopped up. Some poets may have died due to narcotic overdose. Can only be confirmed after autopsy reports are made public. Yeah, thank you. I'm done with my reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chandramohan. I was watching a few of your interviews, and I think somewhere you say that you're a poet, that you came to poetry late, but I think this is your natural medium, and it would be very hard to believe that. It fits you like a glove, and thank you for those brilliant images, which are so fresh, sharp as knives, that take us unaware and very, very poignant in their directive. You've been very, very occupied with translation and the whole art and science of translation. And from one of your poems, these lines struck me. A translated poem is always in transit, like a flock of birds in flight, scripting a camaraderie in a cloudless sky. So, being a bilingual poet, I want to ask you this question. Have you made your peace with translating? And I want to applaud another thing. I love that you started your reading unapologetically saying that you also write in English. And I'm so glad that we are past that phase where poets writing in English, at one point they had to defend writing in English as English not being as genuine or valid as a regional language. There was that fight in Indian English literature for quite a few decades, and I've been to a couple of seminars 20 years ago where it was still a topical uh, conference theme that had to be addressed. And to hear that unapologetic beginning where you say, this is it, times have changed. We own this language as much as any other. So I just would like to hear about a bit of your work with translation, your ongoing war and peace with it, and anything that comes to mind.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. I always felt, when the texts are like read in translation, consumed in translation, there's always a blunting or a misrepresentation or a whatever which already Thing is, by the way, I can't really write in Malayalam. I had my schooling in throughout in English, so I write only in English. But I had genuinely aspired to translate systematically from Malayalam to English. So I have translated very few poets from Malayalam to English, very few, like maybe was 30, 40 poems in put together. Few have been published in literature also. But somehow I feel that I'll genuinely or earnestly long for a generation of Dalit translators from every language to English, so that if you're assuming that Dalit literature is like, scrutinized in English language, the translate is also Dalit and Ambedkarite. As a result, there is no dilution of any kinds of, either the cultural politics nor the, linguistic aspects and whatever that literature is meant to do. So that's something I aspire for. So I'm very optimistic and aspirational that we are on the cusp of a big change in the Dalit related articulations are now whatever visible worldwide. Hopefully, our generation will was the one we have been waiting for, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chandramohan.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure hearing you. I was especially admiring the satire and humor in your work. We are moving on to our third and amazing poet, Sukirtharani. I'm going to put her bio in the chat. I don't know, do you see it?
I've already done that.
Thank you.
Pramila, you just scroll up and it's there.
All right. So I'd like to say a few words about Sukirtharani. So I have been following her work for many years, and it has always been a pleasure for me to read her poems. And most recently, her book, a collection of all her major poems from all her different books have been collected and published by Kalachavadu Publications. She teaches in Tamil Nadu. She's an educator. She teaches in Ranipet in the government higher secondary school. She's a very feelingful poet. She writes beautifully about feminist ideas, about oppression, about and she's also been described as an eco-poet. So she brings all of these different themes together. Most recently, her poems have also being taught in the curriculum in different universities in India. But most recently, her poems in Delhi University were banned. And it is really notable that how important it is that these messages in the poems really are disseminated to the public. And also there is the fear from some of the nationalistic forces in the country that want to ban some of these voices. So I'm just putting that out there so you have a little bit of thought about that as Sukirtharani reads her poems today. And it is my pleasure that she's here, and our translators, Iswarya and Geetha Sukumaran, have been translating her works. So Aishwarya will be translating each of Sukirtharani's poems. Welcome, Sukirtharani, and we are eager to hear your reading.
Good evening to everyone. First of all, I would like to say thanks to Matwaala, Ms. Pramila, Venkateswaran, and Ms. Usha. I convey my love to other poets and translators. Really, I'm so happy reading poetry in this program. Thank you so much. My first poem, கடவுள் என்னும் பயங்கரவாதி. நீ கைகளில் கொலைக்கருவிகளை வைத்திருக்கிறாய், முரட்டு கண்களில் கொடூரம் வைத்திருக்கிறாய், விஸ்வரூபம் எடுத்து 6 அடி மனிதர்களை அடிமைப்படுத்துகிறாய், அவதாரம் எடுத்து எதிர்த்து கேள்வி கேட்பவனின் வயிற்றை கிழிக்கிறாய், உன் கோவிலில் பெண்களை யாராவது வன்புணர்ந்தால் வேடிக்கை பார்க்கிறாய், உன்னைப் போலவே உன்னை வணங்குபவனும் வன்முறையாளனாக இருக்கிறான், உயிர்களை மதத்தால் பிரிக்கிறான், மதம் பிடித்த மதத்தை திணிக்கிறான், மசூதியை இடிக்கிறான், மக்களை கொல்கிறான், வரலாற்றை திரிக்கிறான், வாய்ச்சோற்றை பறிக்கிறான், வரிகளை விதிக்கிறான், மக்களை அகதி என்கிறான், குடியை கெடுக்கிறான், போராடுபவர்களின் மண்டையை பிளக்கிறான், மாட்டு மூத்திரம் குடிக்கிறான். வன்முறையிலிருந்து வெளியே வா. 6-12 என கிளைத்திருக்கும் உன் கரங்களில் இறுக பற்றியிருக்கும் கருவிகளை தயவு செய்து வீசி எறி. அனல் கக்கும் உன் முரட்டு விழிகளை சிநேகம் கசியும்படி கொஞ்சம் அறுவை சிகிச்சை செய்து கொள். 50 அடி 100 அடி என விஸ்வரூபம் எடுக்காமல் 6 அடியாய் குறுகி மக்களோடு மக்களாய் சிதறி நடந்து பார். அவதாரங்கள் எடுத்து மனிதனின் வயிற்று குடலை கிழித்தெறியும் வக்கிரத்தை விடுத்து பசித்த வயிற்றுக்கு சிறிது உணவிடு. நீ வீற்றிருக்கும் கோவிலில் பூசை செய்பவனோ, உன்னால் கைவிடப்பட்ட கோவிலில் வீணர்களோ யாராவது பெண்களை வன்புணர்வு செய்தால் வேடிக்கை பார்க்காமல் அவர்களது ஆண் உறுப்பை கூழாய் நசுக்கிவிடு. உன்னை வணங்குபவன் மனிதனாகும் முன் நீ மனிதனாகு. இல்லையெனில் வரலாற்றில் உன் பெயர் இப்படித்தான் எழுதப்படும், கடவுள் எனும் பயங்கரவாதி.
I'll read the translation now. God, the terrorist. You bear lethal weapons in your hands. You harbor cruelty in your fierce eyes. You assume a gigantic form to enslave mere 6-foot-high mortals. You incarnate and rip open the belly of one who dares defy you. You watch on idly when women are raped in your temple. Your worshipper, too, is violent, just like you. He divides people on religious grounds. He foists on them the mad rage of religion. He tears down mosques. He murders people. He distorts history. He snatches away the morsel in the mouth. He levies taxes. He brands people refugees. He ruins lives. He cleaves the skull of protesters. He drinks cow piss. You first break free of your violence. Please drop the weapons you carry in your sprouting 6 and 12 arms. Alter surgically your fire-spitting fierce eyes to make them ooze grey. Give up assuming your gigantic 50 and 100-foot form, but shrink yourself to 6 feet and walk with the common folk. Quit your perverted incarnations that rip open human innards and feed a few hungry bellies instead. If your worshipper at a temple where you reside, or any scoundrel at temples that you've abandoned, rape women, crush their penises to pulp instead of watching on in silence. Before your worshipper can become human, you turn human first, or else history will record your name only as God the terrorist.
Second poem. தயவு செய்து தற்கொலை செய்து கொள். In the year of 2018, in the village of Thirumalai Gaundanpalayam, Tirupur district, Tamil Nadu, there is a Dalit cook named Papamal. She is working as a cook in government higher secondary school, Thirumalai Gaundanpalayam. The casteist parent of the students refused that that cook that they would not send their children to the school to eat the noon meal, and they would not send their children if Papama continued. So about that issue, I have written this poem. தயவு செய்து தற்கொலை செய்து கொள். நாங்கள் சமையலராக இருக்கிறோம். நாங்கள் சமைத்த உனக்கு வேண்டாம் என்றால், நாங்கள் மருத்துவராக இருக்கிறோம், உனக்கு நீயே வைத்தியம் செய்து கொள். செவிலியராக இருக்கிறோம், உன் பிரசவத்தை நீயே பார்த்துக்கொள். பிணத்தை எரிப்பவராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் பிணத்தை நீயே எரித்துக்கொள். பொறியாளராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் கட்டடத்தை நீயே கட்டிக்கொள். வழக்கறிஞராக இருக்கிறோம். உனக்கு நீயே வாதாடிக்கொள். முடி வெட்டுபவராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் மயிரை நீயே சிரைத்துக்கொள். ஆசிரியராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் பிள்ளைகளுக்கு நீயே சொல்லிக் கொடு. ஓட்டுநராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் போக்குவரத்தை நீயே பார்த்துக்கொள். கூலிகளாய் இருக்கிறோம். உன் சுமைகளை நீயே தூக்கிக்கொள். மலம் அள்ளுபவராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் மலத்தை நீயே அள்ளிக்கொள். சாக்கடை வாருபவராக இருக்கிறோம். உன் சாக்கடையை நீயே வாரிக்கொள். கலப்பு மனம் புரிந்தவராக இருக்கிறோம். உன்னையே நீ புணர்ந்து கொள். நாங்கள் அரசியல் அமைப்பு சட்டத்தை எழுதியவராக இருக்கிறோம். இதுவும் உனக்கு வேண்டாம் எனில் தயவு செய்து தற்கொலை செய்து கொள்.
The title of the poem is Please Kill Yourself. It starts like this. We are cooks. If you refuse the food we make, we are doctors. You treat your own illnesses. We are nurses. You attend to your own childbirth. We are cremators. You burn your own corpse. We are engineers. You construct your own buildings. We are lawyers. You argue your own case. We are barbers. You cut your own hair. We are teachers. You teach your own children. We are drivers. You manage your own commute. We are coolies. You bear your own load. We are scavengers. You carry your own shit. We are sewage cleaners. You clean your own drainage. We are miscegenators. You fuck yourself. We are the writers of the Constitution. If you don't want that either, please kill yourself.
மூன்றாவது கவிதை, பறக்கடவுள். சொல்லுகிறீர்கள், முதுகு விரிய காய்ந்தால் அதன் பெயர் பறவெயில். உலரும் புழுத்த தானியத்தை அலகு கொத்தி விரையும், அது பறக்காகம். கையில் இருப்பதை மணிக்கட்டோடு பறித்து சென்றால் அது பறநாய். நிலத்தை உழுது வியர்வை விதைத்தால் அது பறப்பாடு. சகலத்திற்கும் இப்படியே பெயர் என்றால் இரத்த வெறியில் திளைக்கும் எது அந்த பறக்கடவுள்?
The title of the poem is Pariah God. The scorching summer heat that spreads across your back, you call it pariah sun. What pecks and scats with the worm-ridden grain that dries, you call it pariah crow. Grabbing at what you hold, the beast that rips off your wrist, you call it pariah dog. Tilling the stony soil and sowing the land with sweat, you call it pariah toil. If every bloody thing had to bear such a name, what might one call the one that wallows in bloodlust? Pariah God?
கடைசியாக நூற்றாண்டுகளின் ஒற்றை கேள்வி. இது எனக்கு ரொம்ப பிடிச்ச. ஐ லவ் திஸ் போயம் வெரி மச். நூற்றாண்டுகளின் ஒற்றை கேள்வி. தலை சாய்த்து நீர் அருந்தும் சிறு பட்சியை போல வீட்டின் முற்றத்தில் அமர்ந்திருந்த அப்பாவிடம் கேட்கிறேன். நீர் நாயின் நனையாத தோல் என மினுமினுக்கின்றன அவர் கண்கள். உள்ளுக்குள் உடைப்பெடுத்தாலும் காட்டிக்கொள்ளாமல் நிற்கிறேன். உடலின் குப்பியில் விஷத்தை இட்டாற் போல வலி பெருகுகிறது. உள்ளங்கையை முரமாக்கி சலித்தெடுத்த மண்ணை ருசி பார்த்த காலம் தொட்டே கேட்டு கொண்டிருக்கிறேன். பதில் சொல்வார் இல்லை. ஒட்டு போட்ட சக்கரம் என தும்பியை பிடித்து கழித்த பருவத்திற்கு உருண்டோடுகிறது அவர் மனம். வலி பிசகாமல் அவரும் அவர் அப்பாவிடம் கேட்டது நினைவிலாடும் போல் இருக்கிறது. அப்பாவும் அழுகிறார். நானும் அழுகிறேன். இதயத்தின் ஒற்றை கப்பியில் கட்டப்பட்ட கேள்வியின் ஊஞ்சல் காலத்தின் இருபுறமும் சென்று வருகிறது. பதிலின்றி, பதில் சொல்வார் எவருமின்றி. சற்று தொலைவில் சொப்பு வைத்து விளையாடும், சற்று தொலைவில் சொப்பு வைத்து தனியே விளையாடும் என் மகள் உதட்டின் விளிம்புக்குள் துக்கத்தை மடித்து அதே கேள்வியை கேட்கிறாள் என்னிடம். சேரி ஊராகாதா அம்மா? நன்றி. தேங்க்யூ.
This poem has been translated by translator Anita Jairam. The title is The Question of Centuries. Like a little bird drinking water, leaning its head, I asked my father sitting in the foyer. His eyes glimmer like an otter's skin unwet. Though I crumpled inside, I stand unrevealing. The pain increases as if the vial of the body is filled with poison. Since the day I tasted the mud winnowed using my palm, I've been asking. He never answers. As a patched up wheel, his mind drifts through the happy days of catching dragonflies. With the unvarying pain, the memory of him asking his father may have descended. Dad cries. I cry along. The swing of question, tied to the single pulley of heart, oscillates between the two sides of time. Without answer, with no one to answer. Daughter playing with toys at a distance, restraining her grief within the edge of her mouth, asks the same old question. Why can't a ghetto be a town, Mama? That's the end of the poem.
Thank you so much, Sukirtharani.
Thank you.
I mean, those are very heartfelt poems. I was just so emotional after each poem that you read. I mean, beyond this, the tone of voice lies a very emotional idea of how we could have this kind of inequality that does not give dignity to the human being. I mean, that is the crux of the issue. The question I wanted to ask you is that you have received also opposition to your poetry. So how do you continue to have the courage and the bravery and the love to keep writing and presenting your poems?
நான் தமிழ்லயே சொல்றேன் பிரமிளா.
நீங்க
Can you
தமிழ்ல சொல்லுங்க,
translate me?
அப்புறம் ஐஸ்வர்யா உங்களை டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணுவாங்க.
நான் சுருக்கமா சொல்றேன். ஒரு 25 ஆண்டு காலமா தொடர்ந்து கவிதைகள் எழுதிட்டு வரேன் நானு. தலித் ரைட்டர், தலித் போயட் அப்படின்றது நான் எனக்கு கொடுத்துக்கிட்ட அடையாளம் அல்ல. இந்த சமூகமே எனக்கு கொடுக்கிற ஒரு அடையாளமாக இருக்கிறது. இப்ப ஐ எம் காஸ்ட்லெஸ் அப்படின்னு சொன்னா இந்த சமூகம் வந்து என்னை அப்படிதான் பார்க்கும் இல்லையா? அப்ப இந்த சமூகம் வந்து ஒரு சாதியற்ற சமூகமா மாறணும் அப்படின்னா, நான் சாதியற்ற சமூகமா மாறணும் அப்படின்னா என்னுடைய எழுத்துக்கள் வழியாக அதை நான் சாத்தியப்படுத்தணும் அப்படின்னு தோணுது எனக்கு. அடையாள அரசியல் ரொம்ப முக்கியமானது. இந்த ரொம்ப முக்கியமானதா என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் நான் நினைக்கிறேன். எல்லா இடத்துலயுமே சாதி இருக்கு. ஊர்ல நான் வாழுற இடத்துல சாதி இருக்கு. நான் இறந்தா சுடுகாட்டுல சாதி இருக்கு. வேலை செய்யற இடத்துல சாதி இருக்கு. டிராவல் பண்ணும்போது சாதி இருக்கு. ஸ்கூல்ல எல்லா இடத்துலயுமே சாதி இருக்கு. அப்ப நான் ஒரு தலித் போயட்டா இல்லாம ஒரு பொயட் அப்படின்னு மட்டும் சொல்லிக்கிட்டா இந்த சமூகம் என்ன அப்படி பாக்குறது இல்ல. அதை மாற்றுவதற்கான வேலையை தான் நாங்க பொயட்ரி வழியா செஞ்சிட்டு இருக்கோம். அப்படி எழுதும்போது நிறைய எதிர்ப்புகள் வருது. ஃபெமினிசம், தலித் ஃபெமினிசம் பத்தி கூடுதலா எழுதும்போது பாடி பாலிடிக்ஸ் பத்தி எழுத வேண்டியிருக்கு, பாடி லாங்குவேஜ் பத்தி எழுத வேண்டியிருக்கு. மிக முக்கியமா இந்த தீட்டு, தீண்டாமை, பெண் அடிமைத்தனம், ஆணாதிக்கம், சாதிய சமூகம் எல்லாத்துக்குமே காரணம் வந்து எது அப்படின்னா மதமாக தான் இருக்கு. குறிப்பா நான் பர்டிகுலரா சொல்லணும்னா இந்துத்துவம் தான். அப்ப இந்துத்துவத்தை நீங்க கேள்வி கேட்காம சாதியை வந்து ஒழிக்க முடியாது. அம்பேத்கர் என்ன சொல்றாரு? மதத்தினுடைய வெளிப்பாடுதான் சாதி அப்படின்னு சொல்றாரு. அப்ப நம்ம கொஸ்டின் வந்து எதை பண்ணணும்? நம்ம ஃபெமினிஸ்டுகளும் ரைட்டர்ஸை வந்து மேலோட்டமா பேசிட்டு இருக்கிறாங்க. சாதியை மட்டும் கேள்வி கேட்கறது, ஃபெமினிசத்தை மட்டும் கேள்வி கேட்கறது, ஆணாதிக்கத்தை மட்டும் கேள்வி கேட்கறது அப்படின்னு ரொம்ப மேலோட்டமா தான் தங்களுடைய எழுத்துக்கள் மூலமா கேட்டுட்டு இருக்காங்க. ஆனா ஒரு சிலர் மட்டும்தான், இந்த தலித் பாலிடிக்ஸை புரிஞ்சவங்க மட்டும்தான் இந்த ஆணாதிக்கம், பெண் அடிமைத்தனம் எல்லாத்துக்கும் ரூட் காஸ்ட் எது அப்படின்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா மதம், இந்துத்துவம். அந்த இந்துத்துவத்தை கொஸ்டின் பண்ணாம நம்ம வந்து எதையுமே பண்ணவே முடியாது. அப்ப கற்புன்ற விஷயம் கூட வந்து மதம் தான் உயர்த்தி பிடிக்குது. பெண் அடிமைத்தனத்தையும் உயர்த்தி பிடிக்கும். ஒரு கோயிலுக்குள்ள வந்து பெண்கள் நுழையக்கூடாது அப்படின்றது எது சொல்லுதுன்னா மதம் தான் சொல்லுது. அப்ப பெண் அடிமைத்தனத்தை பத்தி பேசணும்னா நம்ம மதத்தை கேள்வி கேட்குது. அப்ப மதத்தை, இந்துத்துவத்தை கேள்வி கேட்காம இங்க எதுவுமே சாத்தியம் இல்லை அப்படின்றத நான் தொடர்ந்து என்னுடைய கவிதைகள் எல்லாம் நான் தொடர்ந்து செஞ்சுட்டு வரேன். பட் எனக்கு வந்து கவிதை வந்து மிகப்பெரிய ஒரு டூல் அப்படின்னு கூட சொல்ல மாட்டேன். மிகப்பெரிய ஒரு வெப்பன் தான். அது எனக்கு வந்து நம்பிக்கையை கொடுக்குது. எனக்கு கல்வி எனக்கு எப்படி நம்பிக்கை கொடுத்ததோ என்னுடைய கவிதைகளும் எனக்கு நம்பிக்கை கொடுக்கிறது. அதுல வந்து கண்ணீர் எல்லாம் இருக்கவே இருக்காது. என்னுடைய கவிதைகள்ல எமோஷன் இருக்கும். பட் ஒரு சுய இரக்கமோ, ஒரு இரக்கத்தை கோருகின்ற ஒரு டோனும் இருக்கவே இருக்காது. அடிச்சு நொறுக்கிட்டு போயிட்டே இருப்போம் இல்லையா? தயவு தற்கொலை செய்துக்கோ அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு ரெபலா தான் நாங்க சொல்றோம் இல்லையா? அந்த நம்பிக்கையை என் கவிதைகளில் நான் படைக்கின்ற நம்பிக்கையை அதை வாசிக்கிறவங்களுக்கும் கொடுக்கணும். ஒரு எழுத்தாளனுடைய வேலை அதுவாதான் இருக்கு. அதை வாசிக்கிறவங்கள அதே அளவு நம்பிக்கையும் உண்மையும் இருக்கணும். என்னுடைய கவிதைகளில் உண்மை இருக்கிறது, நம்பிக்கை இருக்கிறது, ஒரு கம்பீரம் இருக்கிறது. அதுதான் வந்து ஒரு பெண் விடுதலைக்கான இல்ல தலித் விடுதலைக்கான மிகப்பெரிய ஒரு ஊக்கமாக இருக்கிறது. அந்த நம்பிக்கையும் அந்த உண்மைதான். ஒரு உண்மையை வந்து என்னுடைய கை விளக்காக நான் வச்சிருக்கேன். நம்பிக்கையும் என்னுடைய கருவியாக வச்சிருக்கேன். அதுதான் என்னுடைய கவிதைகள் மூலமா இந்த உலகத்திற்கு நான் எடுத்துட்டு போறது அதுதான்.
I hope I don't miss out any of the things. I've been aggressively typing to, just make sure
That's
I
okay.
translate everything.
Yeah, you can try. Yeah.
Yeah. So she says she's been writing poetry for 25 years. But this label as a Dalit poet was not predominantly something that she took on herself, as much as something given to her by society. She would rather be a casteless poet. But in order to reach that, she says identity politics is an important aspect, because whatever she might call herself, she might just say that she's a poet, but the society continues to view her as a Dalit poet. And she says caste is ubiquitous. It's there in the workplace, in the places of education, right up to the graveyard. Caste is everywhere. And so when she writes about these forms of oppression, about patriarchy, about pollution, this concept of pollution and untouchability, when she touches upon all of these subjects, there's always opposition. And she says many people who try to address casteism or patriarchy or write on feminist themes end up doing so very superficially, because they don't question what is the underlying root cause of all these problems, which she says is religion, specifically the Hindutva ideology. And so she says, as Baba Sahib said, you can't dismantle casteism without questioning religion, questioning Hindutva. And so she says this idea of chastity, the expectation of chastity, or the subjugation of women, the preventing them from entering temples, all these are ideas perpetuated by religion. And so when faced with such opposition, given her Ambedkarite sensibility, she says her poems are her weapon. Her poems help her bolster her own faith, and that there's no place for self-pity in what she writes. Through her poetry, she wishes to sow the same faith that she has in her readers. There is a certain majesty, a truth, and a certain confidence about the way she writes, and she wants to use her poems to plant these in the minds of her readers as well.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Sukirtharani, very well said. Thank you for all your points that you bring out very forcefully and you totally convey your ideas very clearly in your poetry. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pramila. Thank you.
And we are moving on to our next poet, and Usha will be introducing Umesh Solanki.
So, welcome, Umesh. We have a poet from Gujarat, and I'm very curious to hear your work, Umesh, because I think you come with a background of film and journalism, and I'm waiting to hear how poetry fits into all this and how these genres work with each other. We're very, very happy to have you, and it's yours. The mic is yours.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Usha and Pramila and Matwaala. I start reading my poems without any introduction. The Gopika is here because, okay. કવિતાનું શીર્ષક છે બારીક કશુક. અંધારું, પેટમાં કાળું ભમ્મર અંધારું. અંધારું લૂંટીને અંદર ખેંચી ગયું, વિચારને ભરખી ગયું. પછી દાંત વાટે નખ વાટે બહાર આવ્યું, શરીરને ચાટવા લાગ્યું, ધીમે ધીમે ફેલવા લાગ્યું. પછી ડીલ છીનવી ગીધડાનું ઉડવા લાગ્યું, ચાંચ મારવા લાગ્યું. ચાંચ મારે ત્યાં અંધારું, ચકલીને ચાંચ મારી, ચકલી કાળી મેષ, ઘુવડની આંખ ફોડી, રાત કાળી મેષ, ડાળી પર ચાંચ ઠોકી, પાન કાળા મેષ. પછી વિચારવા લાગી, આમ ચાંચ માર્યા કરીશ તો વર્ષો વીતશે, રહેશે તોય અડધી દુનિયા ધોળી ધોળી. અચાનક એક તુક્કો ઉઠ્યો, પાંખો ફફડાવી ઊંચે ને ઊંચે જવા લાગ્યું, પહોંચ્યું સૂરજ કને. પછી સૂરજને ચાંચ મારી, દુનિયા કાળી મેષ. હવે શું ઘાસ, શું થોર, શું ડુક્કર, શું મોર, શું ઘાવ, શું લગાવ, શું ભરચક, શું અભાવ. બધે બધું અંધારું, આંખ ન જોઈ શકે એવું કાળું ભમ્મર અંધારું. તોય પેટથી ઉપર છાતીમાં બારીક કશુંક જળહળ્યા કરતું, અંધારું એનાથી ફફડ્યા કરતું. ગોપી.
Okay, I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
Before I translate this, thank you, Pramila, and thank you, Usha, for organizing this. It's a pleasure to be here with people whose work I have followed and some, at times edited and translated as well. So thank you so much. And Chandramohan, I agree absolutely about what you said about translation and what translation does to Dalit poetry. I've also been on the other side of it, where I've been told that the way I'm translating them is too forceful. So that's also there. This particular poem is, also before I continue, I think we should work more towards bringing in more Dalit translators who are translating from other languages into English. And I think we really need to make a concerted effort to do this, because I think that's really important and that is lacking. So the first poem from Umesh, it's called Barik Kashuk in Gujarati. And I'm a little hesitant to read this translation because it is very fresh. It's fresh off my notebook. I've translated it as something fine, and fine here meaning tiny, meaning small. Darkness inside the belly, pitch black. Darkness pulled the navel inside, devoured all thought, and then emerged through the teeth. It began to bite at the body and spread slowly. Then, grabbing the body of a vulture, it began to fly and poke its beak. Wherever the beak hit, it was darkness. It bit at the sparrow, turning it all black. Poked at the owl's eyes, and the night turned soot black. It pecked at the branch of a tree, and the leaves turned black. Then it began to think, if I keep pecking with my beak, it will take years. The world will still remain white, remain light. Suddenly it had an idea. It spread its wings and flew higher and higher and reached the sun and pecked at the sun with the beak. The world turned black, dark. Now, what remains now of grass or cactus, boar or peacock, wound or affection, all turned to darkness. Darkness which the eye cannot see, yet above the belly, in the chest, a tiny glimmer continued, and the darkness was afraid of the light.
My second poem is E Ena Raste. It is love poem. હળવે ચાલ્યા અમે એક રસ્તે, હવે એ એના રસ્તે હું મારા રસ્તે. ટેરવાની માયા છૂટી, એના ટેરવે ટેરવા ફૂટ્યા, ટેરવા મારા હથેળીમાં ઘૂસ્યા, અને એ એના રસ્તે હું મારા રસ્તે. છેલ્લે જ્યારે મેં જોઈ એને ઝાંખા કાળા વાળમાં, પછી ખોઈ એને હૈયે ત્યારે હામ નહોતી, હામની ઝાંખી ભાળ નહોતી, તોય આંખ આમથી જોતી હતી. નવા અજાણ્યા રસ્તાને છાનું છાનું ઉછાળીને જોર કેટલું હોઈ શકે, ઠાઠ ઠોકરનો માપતી હતી. હતો જ્યારે હું મારા રસ્તે કે એના રસ્તે. નવા અજાણ્યા રસ્તા પર ડગલું માંડ્યું, ડગલામાંથી કોઈમાં કરતું એક પગલું છૂટ્યું, પગલામાંથી લાલ રંગની ધાર નીકળી, ધાર નીકળીને ઊંચે ચડી, ઊંચે ચડીને ઝરણું બની, ઝરણું બનીને નીચે ઉતરી, નીચે ઉતરીને નદી થઈ, નદી થઈ તો ગજબ થયો, ઠોકરનો શેલારો થયો, એક શેલારો હૈશો, બીજો શેલારો હૈશો, હૈશો હૈશો હૈશો, હૈશો હૈશો હૈશો. વર્ષોની વણઝાર ગઈ, દરિયાનો અણસાર નથી, પોપચા પટપટ થયા કરે, પટપટનો લગીર થાક નથી, થાક વગરના પોપચા લઈ, રંગવાળા પાંકડે બેસી, પાનું પુસ્તકનું ખોલ્યું, આખે આખું પાનું જોયું. પાનોમાંથી પાના થયા, ટેરવા થોડા હળવા થયા, પુસ્તક તરત બંધ કર્યું, ઊભા થઈને ડગલું ભર્યું, ને અમે અચાનક ભટકાઈ પડ્યા. એણે જોયું ન જોયું કર્યું, નજરને મેં સ્વસ્થ કરી, જોયું ન જોયુંની કદર કરી, ઠાઠવાળી ઠોકરને પગ હલાવી સરખી કરી. પછી એ એના રસ્તે હું મારા રસ્તે, એ એના રસ્તે હું મારા રસ્તે. ગોપિકા.
Gopika, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that this is what happens when you work with technology. I ended up closing the document I was reading from. So now I have to pull it out again. I'm sorry. Here it is.
સાંભળી શકીએ.
Okay, here it is. This particular translation is by Pratishtha Pandya. She's on her own. We walked gentle steps on a common road, and now she's on her own, and I am on my own. Palms lost touch with palms. Her fingertips on new fingers play. My fingertips in my closed palm do lay. And then she's on her own, and I am on my own. She was lost in the dull, dark hair. Last, when at a distance I saw her, my heart had no courage left, not an iota of it, I bet. But brave eyes stared paths new and strange, secretly swinging every obstacle in the air, mapping the strength and splendor, stumbling on each step. That is when I walked on my own, and she was on her own. I stepped on paths new and strange. Oh no, said a step. And that escaped my feet. A red trail escaped the step, climbed up and turned into a stream. It came down like a stream. It turned into a river. What a wonder was that river. I stumbled like a wave. First wave, high shore. Second wave, high shore, high shore, high shore, high shore, high shore, high shore, high shore. The caravan of time passes. There's no sign of the sea. My eyelids flutter, an incessant flutter. I sit on a colored bench, stare at the leaf from an open book. The whole of the leaf, look, leaf turns into leaves. Light are my fingertips. I closed the book. I took a step and lo, we bumped into each other. She pretends she did not see me. I gathered my gaze, accepting the neglect. I fixed my foot, past the grand stumble. It was then that she was on her own and I was on my own. She was on her own and I was on my own. I'd like to say here that Umesh has written a series of love poems, and he's titled the collection 28 Love Poems. And I think it's very, I think just to write love poems in our times today, I think is an important act. And for a Dalit poet to write love poems, I think is a very important act, because it's about claiming that right to love and to be loved in a time of hate and in a place of hate.
Third poem is Parampara. આ રચના વિચરતા અને વિમુક્ત માનવ સમુદાયના સંદર્ભમાં છે. શીર્ષક પરંપરા. મારા દેશનું નામ ખબર નથી, મારા દેશનો ધર્મ ખબર નથી, મારા દેશની જાતિ ખબર નથી. હા, મારા દેશની એક પરંપરા છે. પરંપરા પાછી રૂઢિચુસ્ત છે. પરંપરાનું નામ ખબર નથી, પણ પરંપરા વિશે આમ કહી શકું, પાણીને એની સાથે ફાવતું નથી, ભૂખને એનું વળગણ છે, હવાથી એ વિખેરાઈ જાય છે, વરસાદથી એ ઉભરાઈ જાય છે, એની ગોદડીમાં ઠંડી ઠૂંઠવાઈ જાય છે. હજી ઉમેરણ કરી શકું, બાલ કે વૃદ્ધ, કિશોર કે યુવાન, સ્ત્રી કે પુરુષ, મારા દેશવાસીના ભાલમાં પરંપરા, આંખમાં પરંપરા, બેસી ગયેલા ગાલમાં પરંપરા, ચામમાં પરંપરા, બહાર આવવા મથી રહેલા હાડમાં પરંપરા, એના શરીરમાં રક્તવાહિનીઓ નહીં, પરંપરા વાહિનીઓ છે. મારો દેશવાસી પરંપરા ખાય છે ને પરંપરા કાઢે છે. મારા દેશમાં પરંપરા જીવે છે, જન્મે છે ને મરે છે. બસ મારો દેશવાસી. મારો આ દેશ જોવા તું આવીશ ને?
This one is titled Tradition, and Umesh says that he's written it in the context of nomadic and denotified tribes and communities. Tradition. I do not know the name of my country. I do not know the religion of my country. I do not know the caste of my country. My country has a tradition, an orthodox tradition. I do not know the name of that tradition, but I can say this about the tradition. Water does not get along with it. Hunger is its constant companion. It is scattered by the wind. It overflows in the rain. It shivers cold in the blanket. I can add this. Child or aged, adolescent or young, man or woman, my fellow citizens carry it on their forehead, in their eyes, in their sunken cheeks, in their skin, in their skeleton. They cannot escape this tradition. They do not have blood vessels in their bodies. They have tradition vessels. My fellow citizens consume the tradition and expel it. The tradition lives in my country. The citizens, my friend, they are born and they die. Will you come to see my country? Won't you?
How many poems I can read? How many poems I can read?
Shall we do one or two more?
Yes, sure, surely.
શીર્ષક ખેંચાણ. It is love poem. આજકાલ હું ફૂલ નથી કહેતો, એના શ્વાસનો આકાર કહું છું. ચંદ્રને ચંદ્ર નથી કહેતો, એના સ્પર્શનો ચમત્કાર કહું છું. એના કેશને કેશ નથી કહેતો, ત્રીજા નેત્રના ઉઘડેલા પોપચાના પરિણામની કાળી ધૂમ્રસેરો કહું છું. એની વાતોમાં મહાન પ્રેમ ગીતમાં લપાયેલા કોઈ કુંવાર અર્થને શોધું છું. સરોવર જેવા એના શરીર પર મંદ મંદ શ્વાસથી લહેરો બનાવું છું. છતાં કોઈ પ્રબળ ખેંચાણ ખેંચી જાય છે મને, ખખડી ગયેલી ઝૂંપડીના ખૂણામાં પડેલા ઘાસ્તેલિયા દીવાની થરથરતી જીવતાડે હાથ ધરવા, બાળોતિયા વગરની નિર્દોષતાને હૂંફ આપવા, ઠંડા પડી ગયેલા લોહીને શબ્દોના લાવાથી ગરમ કરવા, ને તરત પછી સામે એની બની જાઉં છું હું ઠંડુ પડી ગયેલું શરીર. આજકાલ હું ઠંડુ પડી ગયેલું શરીર પણ બની જાઉં છું.
Gravity. These days, I do not call flowers flowers. I say they are the shape of a breath. I do not call the moon moon. I speak of the wonder of her touch. I do not call her hair hair. I say they are dark coils of smoke emanating from the opening of the third eye. In her words, I look for new meaning, intertwined in a great love song. Across her lake body, I blow slow waves with breath, and yet something draws me, urges me to put my hand on the flame of a kerosene lamp in some dark corner of a rundown hut, to give warmth and innocence, to heat cold blood with the lava of words. And all of a sudden, in her presence, I become a cold body. These days, I also become cold, a body. One more, Umesh.
Yeah.
It should be
last one. This is
last one.
ટાઇટલ ઇઝ અટકી પડવું જોઈએ. અટકી પડવું જોઈએ. અસ્તિત્વનો ખ્યાલ આપે એ રીતે ક્યાં કશું તો અટકી પડવું જોઈએ. ચાની કીટલી પર ચા થીજી જવી જોઈએ. પાનના ગલ્લે સોપારી કપચી થઈ જવી જોઈએ. લારીમાં શાકભાજી પથ્થર થઈ જવી જોઈએ. પકોડી કૂકા બની જવી જોઈએ. પૈસાને સ્પર્શતા જ ટેરવા મરી ગયેલા છીપલા થઈ જવા જોઈએ. છાપાના શબ્દો માણસને ચોંટી જાય જે રીતે એ રીતે ચાલતા ચાલતા માણસ જમીન પર ચોંટી જવો જોઈએ. અટકી પડવું જોઈએ. અસ્તિત્વનો ખ્યાલ આપે એ રીતે ક્યાંક કશું તો અટકી પડવું જોઈએ. ઓકે.
It should cease. Something should freeze. It should cease. Somewhere, something should freeze, as if to remind us of existence. Something should cease. At the cha kitli, tea should freeze. At the pan shop, shaved betel nuts should turn to gravel. Vegetables on the vendor's cart should mutate to stone. Pakoris should morph to pebbles. Merely touching money should render soft fingertips insensate, like dead oysters. A person walking down the street should stick to the earth like words in a newspaper that haunt the reader. Something somewhere should freeze to remind us we exist. Thank you.
હું જઉં ગોપિકા બહાર વાટ જોઈ લે છે. Okay. Sorry friends, I have to leave because some friends are waiting for me the outside of this office, because this is not my home but friend's office. So thank you so much, Matwaala.
Thank you, Umesh. Before you go, I just want to first thank you and thank Gopika. The audio qualities to your work is so hypnotic, and I just love the surreal quality to your work. It was like being really in a magic land. The way you combine the most unusual images and your doorway into the poems are so unexpected, so fresh. I was hanging on every line because I didn't know what was going to come. It is so new and so lovely, like this touch of magic realism almost over all the poems. Thank you so much, Umesh and Gopika read beautifully. I wish you could stay, but we understand you've got your constraints. Thank you so much, Umesh, and we hope to be in touch with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Usha and Pramila.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you, Umesh. This was
Uh,
just fabulous reading.
Thank you so much. Gopika, thank you for beautiful translating. Go.
So I would like to thank all the poets. Thank you, Gopika. Gopika, since Umesh has left, would you like to say a little bit about translating the poems?
Yes, sure. So, one of the, sorry, I'm just going to turn the switch on because my computer's died. Yeah. All right. So, I think Umesh's work is like you said, there's this almost a real quality to it. So in a way, it's both easy and difficult to translate because you're able to pick on an image and work with the image. And when you have that image to hang on to, the translation falls into place. But the difficult bit is his sentences really flow in Gujarati. And syntactically, it is a nightmare. To translate that into English, because in so many of our Indian languages, our sentences, run the other way around. Our clauses are opposite.
Yeah.
So to do that, it is very, very difficult. And to also then bring it, the fluidity that he has in his Gujarati, I think that's the difficult bit. But also, I think at the same time, what Chandramohan was saying, that it's so much of our English translation blunts poetry, especially Dalit poetry or poetry of protest, is blunted when we translate it into English, because our Indian languages have, the words themselves have so much force, and there's a cultural force and context to them, which I think is very difficult to preserve in English. And my solution, I think, sometimes is to bring in allusions that help preserve that. So for instance, a while ago, I translated a poem by Priyanka Kalpit, who's one of the very few Gujarati women writing, Dalit poetry. And she has this poem which I translated as Bitter Crop. And then so you bring in that illusion of the of the song, and it's of strange fruit, because the poem is about the body, and it is about the atrocities on the body. So I think as a translator, you, instead of blunting it, instead of making the English flat, I think it's also about bringing in resonances and bringing in a quality that does exist in English poetry, in a lot of poetry of protest, and in Black poetry in the English language. I think that is the way to go, rather than thinking that English is flattening it out and it makes it lifeless. I think let us think about what life can we bring to it, and how can we keep it alive? How can we keep the edge in the words? How do we not rub off the edges? Because I don't want to sanitize it.
Yeah,
that's the worst thing you can do to any of this work. And I think the other struggle is with editors who want to sanitize it. Because and it's particularly if it's going to a Western audience, and it's an editor from the West. I think that there is this desire to make it better English. And then you have to say, I know my grammar. You don't need to correct my sentence. If I've left it like that, it has a purpose.
That's right. Well said, Gopika. That's just fabulous, the points that you bring up. And and it's also wonderful to listen to the richness in the original text, the music in the original text, the power, the force, all of that. It's true. And both of your translations, Aishwarya, Gopika, and Geetha, who is also here, your translations were, quite wonderful. I would encourage all of you to read our poets. So I have the bios in the chat. So there are like 3 dots at the bottom, so you can even save the chat. So you can try to find translations of the poets' works online. And of course, Chandramohan's is available. His books are available. So you can try to find them on Amazon. At this moment, I would like to thank all of our poets, Arangamallika, Sukirtharani, Umesh Solanki, and Chandramohan Satyanathan, and also our translators, Aishwarya, Gopika Jadeja, and Geetha Sukumaran. It is really wonderful that we could have this very, very meaningful panel today. It means a lot to Usha and me. And we are hoping to disseminate the recording so that more people who could not be here today can listen to it. And thank you to our audience. I know some of you woke up super early to be able to attend this reading. So thank you for being here. And I wish you all the best. And let's keep in touch. And please look at our Matwaala website, www.matwaala.com, to pay attention to some of the future programs that we have coming up, and which we are also listing on the chat. So please, keep in touch. And I salute all of you. Keep writing, keep attending, keep reading Dalit poetry, and tell all your friends about the poets that you heard today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Aishwarya.
No, thank